It's a blast from the past, it's my time to broadcast, first time in a year oft neglected, as the sun shone brightly and the hits were played nightly in 72, a year to be respected. Newsflash people, it is April 1972 and it's an amazing top 10. 72 often gets lost between the two heavy hitters of 71 and 73, but the hits were fantastic all year long. The air was full of sounds, so let's get down to it. Kicking off this week with a section that couldn't bring itself to vote for Peter Dutton, so it just put two blank pieces of paper in the box. Hello and goodbye! 3 in and 3 out of the top 10 this week. We say goodbye to Apollo 100's instrumental Joy, which made number 2 and spent 5 weeks in the top 10. Apollo 100 were a studio group that featured Clem Catini, who was at one point on Jimmy Page's radar for Led Zeppelin, and Vic Flick, the man who played the guitar riff on the James Bond theme. Accompanying it is another one-time number 2, One Tin Soldier by Coven, an interesting group who in 1969 recorded a song called Black Sabbath and had a bass player called Oz Osborne, and their singer Jinx Dawson was not unaverse to getting her kid off for a gatefold inner cover. Finally, we bid adieu to Kiss an Angel Good Morning by Charlie Pride after 2 weeks in the 10 for a top of 7. If you close your eyes and try to imagine what a male country singer's voice should sound like, I'm betting what you hear is going to be something close to Charlie's voice. A great singer and a great man to go with it. Taking their places in the top 10 this week are Roberta Flack's First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which will pop up numerous times in this video, Son of My Father by Chicory, an early Giorgio Moroder experiment, and the mighty Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs with the greatest set closer in Australian history. Most people I know think that I'm crazy. Another one bound for number 2. Biggest hit leaving the chart this week was Solly Solly by Middle of the Road, which spent 11 weeks on the charts and made number 4. And the biggest hit coming up on was a future 2-week number 1, Open Up Your Heart from G. Wayne Thomas, which was featured on the soundtrack to the legendary surfy film Morning of the Earth. It has a really cool guitar solo. If anyone knows who played it, will you tell me? And the next number 1 hit was We Fly, A Rumour of Festivities by Barack Carter. They should be pretty easy to solve, but the answer's at the end should you need it. At number 10, 2 weeks in and rising 28 places and up for another big jump next week is the late great Roberta Flack with The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. Propelled up the charts no doubt by its prominent inclusion on the soundtrack of Clint Eastwood's huge hit Play Misty for Me, it's a little unfair to lean too heavily on that fact, as Flack had more than paid her dues and was a mature and highly principled singer. Although this was her first big hit, it was far from her last, as she became an instantly recognisable voice on both pop and AOR stations right across the next 25 years, with 3 number 1s and many top 10s in the USA and a string of solid hits here. Roberta Flack trivia, she was John Lennon's across the hallway neighbour in the Dakota Building. 9. Carole King, one of the supreme songwriters of her generation, has only managed 3 top 10 hits so far in her career as a singer, but she did have a 4th in my hometown with Sweet Seasons, which despite tapping out at number 19 nationally made number 4 here. It's a disposable piece of pop fluff which shows off King's native strength, irresistible tunes and more hooks than a convention of pirates. It's just me, and if there's one thing I have learned from the internet is that it's never just me and people usually just ask it to attract comments and seem relatable, or with this song, optimistic tone notwithstanding, not a sound out of place on Steely Dan's first album. In at 8 is a Stone classic.
Stone classic!
A song that is indelibly burned into my brain as one of my favourite records of those early radio years. Listening to it for research here, it was the first time I'd heard it for many years, and it is glorious, magnificent. Of course, I'm talking about Son of My Father by Chicory Tip, one of the few songs that I can't understand what a single word of the lyrics mean, but what a groove. The massive farty synths, the cool swishy drumming, the football terrace chant of a chorus. This was as good as it got for the tipsters though, spending another week at 8 before slipping down the charts thereafter. At 7 we have Aussie Gold, simply one of the greatest Australian records of all time by the man I consider to be the greatest Australian rocker of all time, Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs. Most people I know think that I'm crazy. Thorpe was crazy. He was passionate, funny, a great songwriter, a committed rocker, a brutal guitarist, a showman non par AL, and a fun guy beloved by every audience he ever played for. Coming out of my hometown in the mid-60s in the wake of the Bee Gees, by 1972 he'd had 3 distinct incarnations: wild tormentor of teeny boppers and hard rockers alike, pop balladeer, and ever-present music festival fixture, maker of the first triple album in Australian history, and ear-splitting volume merchant, and 2 more incarnations to follow. Had he lived, National Treasure would have been number 6. Fantastic as MPIK was, Say It Quietly, but the follow-up, Believe It Just Like Me, was even better. Number 6 is the mysterious, at least to me, Follow Your Drum by English, yes, singer Don Farden. It must be said that Farden isn't the greatest singer ever known to the top 40, but he gets the job done, I guess, and the song has a rough and ready, more rock than country rock vibe to it. An unmemorable record, but this is just the place where we remember such things. At number 5, a massive hit on its way down the charts, Without You by Harry Nilsson. Originally recorded by the, once again, criminally underrated Badfinger, this song has a tragic coda in so much as the legal dispute over authorships was a precipitating factor in co-writer Tom Evans deciding to end it all in 1983. But the song, described by Paul McCartney as the killer ballad of all time with its gentle and sentimental verse and soaring and intense chorus, was album filler for Badfinger. It was Nilsson with his overdeveloped sense of theatre who doubled down on every strength of the song, making it the Grand Goujonol of contemporary pop. Time now to inspect the best songs that the old hometown chose not to elevate to the top 10.
Local record buyer is an idiot.
Neil Young's Heart of Gold, which was the US number 1, only wobbled as high as 4 in a 6-week run. Attended album, Harvest, did make the top for a week. Never Been to Spain by Three Dog Night spent an epic 12 weeks on the charts, but somehow only snuck up to number 15. And Stay With Me by professional rough and tumblists The Faces, despite having a wonderful B-side in Debris, smashed and grabbed its way to no better than 18 in a 7-week run. Thought it surely would have done better. Perhaps Billy Thorpe's only peer as local singer-songwriter rocker was Russell Morris, and he's here at 4 this week with Live With Friends, my personal favourite of his many hits, and another song that overperformed here where it peaked at 4, as opposed to nationally where it got to number 13. It's a bit similar to Without You in as much as its sad reflective verse and more intense chorus, but it's a lot more intimate and sincere sounding. Morris has had a long career, approaching 50 years, and is today one of the most respected blues performers in Australia, with a rare eye for Australian subjects and folklore in his lyrics. He'll still trot out the old favourites, including his 1969 number 1 The Real Thing, which was the first Australian 45, cost over $10,000 to produce, which is surprising seeing it was recorded in someone's front living room. Back at number 9, we had the wonderful Carole King, who to this day is perhaps the greatest living American songwriter. Carole's legendary album Tapestry, released the previous year, was still high in the charts around the world. So I got to wondering, how did it compare to the best performing album from her heir apparent, Taylor Swift? Only one way to find out. Let's go to our newest segment, There's Gonna Be a Showdown. Carole's Tapestry arrived in February 1971, whereas Taylor's biggest album, 1989, dropped in late 2014. So right off we have a battle between the digital age and the physical. Both albums made number 1. Carole's was a slow burner, taking 3 months to get to the top, dispatching the Rolling Stones as sticky fingers to do so. It spent 15 consecutive weeks at number 1, and the run was ended by Rod Stewart's Every Picture Tells a Story. Whereas Switty, as is the way in the digital era, went straight in at number 1, shifting Slipknot from the top spot. 1989 did 11 non-consecutive weeks at number 1, with the longest single stretch on top at 4 weeks. One Direction, J. Cole, Meghan Trainor, she's great, I like her, and Fall Out Boy all interrupted her time at the top before her nemesis, Drake, finally finished the album off. Sales-wise, Tapestry sold about 25 million copies, which made it, until Saturday Night Fever came along, the biggest selling album of all time. 1989 has, so far, shifted about 14.7 million copies. 1989 sold 1.257 million copies in its first week. Swift always sells huge numbers in the first week and then cools down. Both Midnight's and Tortured Poets Department broke records for the most sales of an album ever in a single day, and Tortured Poets Department shipped 2.6 million copies in its first week. Tapestry spent 318 weeks in the Billboard 200 and spawned one top 10 single, 5-week number 1 with I Feel the Earth Move. 1989 has spent 260 weeks so far in the chart and has spawned 3 number 1s, totaling 12 weeks all up. At the time of writing, while Swift has 7 albums in the top 200, 1989 is not one of them. Given that Swift has re-recorded the album, it's unlikely it'll get much more chart traction. Streams, as you would expect in a digital versus physical era shootout, is a rather alarming comparison. Tapestry has a very presentable 853 million and is the 2,191st most streamed record ever. 1989 has, breathe deep, 9.1 billion streams, making it the 36th most streamed album of all time, and it gains about 2.5 million a day. Swift all up is the most streamed artist of all time. Here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting I mean very, very nerdy, and I'm not 100% of what I'm talking about here. 1989 sales are calculated by what are called album equivalent units, which uses a long and constantly changing algorithm to try and reconcile all the different formats to establish a meaningful comparison between the numbers we see in digital sales as compared to the more get-your-head-aroundable numbers for physical sales. Without going into too much detail, because I frankly don't understand it, but 1989's 9.1 billion streams also account for that 14.7 million album sales. So the equation is a bit like 9.1 billion divided by 1500. 1500 streams equals an album. So that accounts for about 7.2 million of those sales. Songs from 1989 have 11 billion views on YouTube. 6,750 YouTube views equals one album sale, so that's another 1.6 million. There are digital single sales, which was still a thing in 2014, and songs from 1989 account for 3.2 million album equivalents. There are also various other smaller streaming and sales services that factor in, including the notorious Chinese streaming industry, so that leaves 1989 selling about 2 million physical discs, and I own 2 of them. Back to reality. Tapestry won 4 Grammys, Record, Album and Song of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal. 1989 won 3, Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal and Best Video. And finally, Tapestry scored number 1s in 4 major markets and was a number 4 and a number 3 hit in the UK and Australia respectively, while 1989 also had 4 major market number 1s and a number 2 in Japan. I'm going to say it looks like Tapestry won this one. What do you think? Either way, a worthy battle between 2 great albums by 2 great artists. Third in the grand scheme of things, coming in at number 3 as it does, is the erstwhile king of Australian country music, Johnny Chester, then at the peak of his chart viability. He's represented by Sir Lancelot's well-travelled calypso, Shame and Scandal, which dates from the early 40s, which at one point was recorded by the Wailers. A silly novelty song, its chief virtue is that it's short. A fun Johnny Chester fact, back in 1964, he and his band The Chessmen opened up for the Beatles on their 1964 tour of Australia and New Zealand. Number 2 this week, somewhat surprisingly, Dolly Parton with her wonderful Coat of Many Colours. I say surprising because, to most people, Dolly isn't really a thing until Jolene surfaced, some years after its original release to herald the plastic fantastic version of Dolly in the late 70s. But she was, of course, a long-established treasure on the country scene for the best part of 10 years before that, for her work with Porter Wagner and her own remarkable string of albums in the late 60s and early 70s, for her astonishing voice, which even today improves and becomes an ever more expressive instrument, and the quality of her songwriting. This particular song, because Dolly couldn't get any paper to hand on the tour bus, was scribbled on the back of a dry cleaner's receipts for one of Porter Wagner's suits. Wagner made sure to keep the receipt after claiming the suit back, and later donated it to Dolly's Chasing Rainbows Museum in Dollywood. A song which only Dolly could write, and if anyone else did, they'd just be ripping her off. It's almost mawkishly sentimental, yet it has a pride and a sense of dignity to it, and cloying as it may feel, it seems uncomfortably real. It's no Down from Dover, but a great many people think it's her greatest song, and when you're as great a songwriter as Dolly Parton, close to your best is better than most writers will ever get. Some fantastic facts for those with a fetish for folderol. The easternmost point of the territorial USA, in Guam, and the westernmost in St. Croix, both have the same name, Point Udall. The square of 111,111,111 is the palindromic number 12345678987654321. The Australian Alps receive more annual snowfall than the Swiss Alps. In your face, Switzerland. Now, full of Aussie pride, I present the following. It's Val's Fantastic World of Facts. Biggest riser this week with an amazing 28 places is The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, into 10 from 38, with plenty more to come. Biggest fall this week is poor old Badfinger, whose marvellous Day After Day drops 18 spots from 19 to 37. Biggest debut this week is Sweet, with Papa Joe in at 34. Not yet the glam rock behemoth they would become, it was the track on the album that followed Papa Joe, The Mighty Little Willie, that would project them into the Parthenon of glam rock gods. And the longest runner on the chart this week is Don McLean's former 3-week number 1, American Pie, still hanging in at number 20 after 14 weeks. In the US, Roberta Flack holds sway with The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, and in the UK it is, wait for it, the pipes and drums and military band of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, with their stirring version of Amazing Grace, a future 3-week number 1 here. This time last year, Rose Garden by by Lynn Anderson held on to the top spot for its second week, and next year, Top of the World by the Carpenters was, well, literally top of the world. 1972 was the year of the mega album. Cat Stevens' Tea for the Tillermen spent 15 weeks on top, Slade Alive 12 weeks and then was knocked off by Slade, that spent 6 weeks out there. Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick spent 11 weeks in the big seat, and Cat then had Catch Bullet 4 in for 7 weeks. But this week's number one spent 11 weeks on top, and it's Don McLean's American Pie, spawner of hit singles that it was. A few weekishes back, I was musing on the number one for my birthday. Just for a bit of fun, here are my 12 favourite records ever to be number one on my birthday that we'll see over the course of this series.
And it all begins where it ends. Was it love and it was a gas? Soon turned out had a heart of glass. It's bound to get you in, get you under your skin, hit you right on the chin. Oh yeah! It's bound to be. Cats, you know where it's at. But come on, let's go to my flat. Lay down and groove on the mat. I go out every night and sleep all day.
It's not unusual you want to be loved by anyone. It's not unusual you want to have fun with anyone.
In my imagination, there is no complication. I dream about you all the time. I don't know why sometimes I get frightened. Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know.
Wowie zowie, how do you follow our number two, Dolly Parton? Let's see if the number one record in town this week matches up to the quality of the Dollity with Monty the Safety Monkey.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the lights.
After all that, and after all the great records this week on the charts, is a bit of a letdown that America's limpid horse with no name, with its pallid Neil Youngisms and frankly gibberish lyrics. Randy Newman, with his usual withering sarcasm, described the song as being about a kid who thinks he's just taken acid for the first time. The tune is pleasant enough, certainly, and the arrangement with the odd guitar tuning is interesting. It's far from the worst example of, is this wimp rock or yacht rock? I'll let you decide. You can imagine, and it is a song of its time, forever late 1971, early 1972. A more innocent time before we killed all the hippies. Well, we didn't kill all the hippies. And there we have it, a fantastic top 40 from a week in what was for me personally one of the most important years for music ever. The radio fairly bursting with great hits 24/7. Where were you in 72? Who were you in 72? Were you even in 72? Share your stories below, and in the meantime, should the good Lord be a willer and the creeks don't rise, we will be back with another instalment next week. Gish.